And one useful setting in here is the gusting. And if you hit the gusting, you get something like this. And this is going to create an offset in here, which the tree is periodically going to here and coming back to the maximum amount of the wind that you set. And it's going to make the wind stronger a bit just in sometimes, and sometimes it's going to make it lower as well. I'm not going to always set the wind between this min and max. It's going to offset it just to another value so that you have offset in the wind as well. And you can use this one to change the frequency and the strength as well. And of course, using the duration, you can determine how many times and how much times it goes there. So this is for the wind. And of course, there are some other wind options which are really advanced and not using for beginners. And now we're going to be talking about the light maps. So let's disable the wind. And the next thing that we're going to talk about is the light mapping. And the next thing that we're going to be talking about is the light mapping. And light mapping is especially useful for Unreal Engine 4 and to some extent Unreal Engine 5 if you want to use the static baked lighting. It's going to create a second set of UV sets for you as the second UV channel, so that when you bake the lighting gets baked on those second UV channels. And if you are familiar with the UV channel, you really have no difficulty in understanding the concept of the light map. So to understand that, let's take this spark and I'm going to assign this material on top of this. You see, this material gets shown on the UVs of the mesh, and whatever color data that you see on the mesh is happening on the first channel. So for Unreal Engine, for static lighting, you need to create a second UV channel so that the lighting bakes the lighting information that comes from the sky down to the model. So we put them on the second UV channel and call them light map UVs. And SP3 has an automated way to create the light maps for your model, and it's really handy. It's going to pack all of the things that you create into light mapping section. So to see the light map, you go to render mode and the light map. And this is the light map section that you see happening here. There are some green shades which are getting a good quality and a good balance between the amount of the geometry and the amount of the lighting information that it receives. I mean lighting resolution. And there are blue, and this blue is a little bit smaller than that. It's not receiving the lighting resolution that it should. So you must push this towards the green, and then there's this redder area which are waste, and they are getting too much attention depending on their size. So you must have all of them to be green ideally. But a lot of the times that is not possible. So you have to choose which parts of your tree you want to have the most resolution on. For example, if the player is going to be walking in this way and be able to see this trunk from close up, you want this trunk to have a lot of resolution on it. Or if you want to make this one for any reason have a better lighting and shadow quality, you want to push the light map density forward to make that happen. So before doing anything, you can go to the tree generator I mean, and there's a light map section in here, and there's a light map resolution as well. And this is basically how much resolution you want to give to this specific tree. And now we are packing all of the things inside a 128 by 128 square. And if you want to increase this too much, for example, if this is a case for an Arquist scene instead of a game scene, you might want to push this up. Because on games you want to be as performant as possible. But if there's a cinematic scene or an Arquist scene which you need a lot of high quality crisp shadow details, you want to push this up. So for example, let's go to 25, and now you see the resolution gets up and we have a lot of resolution on these parts. And if you're going to fine tune the detail that you want to get, you must go to each generator, and in the UV section you should go down to the bottom of the list, and that is the height map. And you want to increase the weight of each generator that you want to apply the most height map to. So now by default it's 1, And if you want to make this take more space, it's not going to resize this only, but it's going to resize all of these as well. If you are going to make this bigger, these ones get smaller because we have only a limited amount of space in here, and we're bound to 0 to 1 UV space. And if you make this one larger, let's take this and make it 2. You see, it makes this one larger, but other ones lose quality as well. So it's a balance game. You should be able to choose a right balance and a right workaround for yourself. For example, assigning a great weight to the places that you want to have the most resolution, and then a smaller weight for parts that you really do not want the player to see. For example, this part in here, the player isn't really going to be seeing that. So why assigning so much space to that? So let's go see where there are. That is into these big branches, and now let's bring the weight down to 0.5, and now you see all of them get resized, but we really do not want that. Let's set it to V1, and I want the branches in here to have the maximum resolution, and these branches up top to have the lesser resolution, so that we save a lot of space from this. So while keeping this on 1, I'm going to the distribution, and this distributes the amount of the everything that we have depending on the size and the amount that we set here. So this is the beginning and this is the last. I want the last branches to have the minimum amount of UV space assigned to them. So if we go up in here, it's instead manipulating each UV island instead of controlling them as a whole. So this controls the UV islands themselves instead of controlling the whole. So I bring this down, and let's see what happens in here. This is what happens to the UV islands. So this is the amount that it gives to the first of the UV island, I mean the bottom, and this is for the top of them. So what I intended was going for the parent curve. And when I select this, let's say that until this part, I want the full resolution. But after this one, I want the resolution to come down. So in here, you see where the player is able to see the most, we are getting the most resolution. But on the parts where the player isn't able to see, you see now these branches, instead of being green, they are blue. And this is a balance game, really. Ideally, it's best to have the all parts of the green, but most of the times that is not really possible. So instead, we try to change them and assign the resolution, the most resolution, the green part, to the parts that the player is most likely to be seeing. So this is the trunk, and on this part, which is hidden in the tree, and the player is never able to see that, we are seeing some red areas. So let's go in here and right again, I'm going to make this part have the full resolution, and I'm going to bring this part down so that we have something like this, which is this part is green, or even better, let's make this one blue so that a lot of the parts get greener. So let's instead bring this one and bring this one to here and bring this one down to manipulate the amount. So let's go here, select these, and this is alright. The branches that the player is going to be seeing are right. And for these branches, I'm going to assign the most resolution on the parts which are closer to the ground and most likely being seen by the player. So I'm going to keep these 100 and bring the hires down, so that in this method we have the most resolution on the parts that the player is going to be seeing and less resolution for the parts that the player isn't going to see. So for the leaves as well, which are the most important one, let's go to lighting, and for the weight, let's set it to 0.5, and this should really affect the tree. Let's make it 1, and now we have balanced it pretty much very well. We have a good amount of green in here, but this one needs to be adjusted just a bit. So let's bring this one up and assign a bit of green to this as well. So you see now the most of the tree is being rendered in green, and we have used a lot of the space from this. So it's a bit of playing around to find a good balance for you. And of course, you should have optimization in mind as well. If it's for a game, you really do not want to use higher resolutions. For example, going for 512 or things like that. But dependent on the importance of the tree and how many times it's going to be rendered and how fast you want it to be calculated. You want to select something and go for the rest. Okay, this was for the light map creation, and now I'm going to delete this tree and bring these up to check the light map density on these. So now you see, because there are a lot of clusters in here, it's being rendered in blue. And if you want to get the true one, you want to remove this zone. And let's take all of these. Let's remove this zone and connect these to the tree. So now for this one, at 256 resolution is too much. So let's go down to something like this. And even this one is getting too much. Let's go down even more, something like this. And without any manipulation, we are getting green everywhere. So you saw that for a tree, 256 did. And for this one, 256 was an overkill, 128 was too much, and now 64 is right. And if we go to 32, you see it gets better even. And now we have a good shade of green that we can put into our game engine. And if you import this, export this, which we are going to talk about later on, you are exporting this with the light maps into Unreal Engine. And Unreal Engine recognizes this second UV channel that you created and will use that for baked lighting. And I mean only for the baked lighting. And if you are going to use a movable lighting situation, this might not be helpful. Okay, this is the final lesson in chapter 3. Congratulations on finishing, and I'll see you in the next chapter where we talk about from a speed tree to other applications as well. So see you in the next lesson, or see you in the next chapter. Okay, congratulations on finishing the third chapter, which we created the grass and bush for games. Of course, the bush applies to any kind of tree, and using those techniques, really you can create any tree for yourself. So in this final lesson in the third chapter, we're going to be talking about the wind and the light mapping for games. So without any waiting, let's go to Wind Wizard in here, or going to Tools and Wind Wizard. Start setting up the wind. So the preset, we're going to use grass. And the next one is generator wind weight, which we have not talked about yet. And the next one is the condition. Let's set it to call. And do you want the faster computation speed or the quality? So we set it to quality. And in here it has detected some fronts. Do you want these fronts to be any of these kinds? So we're going to set the default and hit OK. And now the wind animation is playing very good, and it's giving us a very good result. And also we have these controls to determine the maximum and minimum amount of the wind that is happening here, depending on our needs. So this is what is happening there. And to create winds for trees, I'm going to first disable this and create a simple default tree. So trunk, and as always, I'm going to give it big branches, little branches, again another little branches, and then twigs. And then after these, I'm going to assign the leaves to them. So we have created a basic tree that we are going to assign the wind animation on. So as for the LOD, we had some general settings in this dynamic LOD which really were applied to whole world. But also for the wind as well, we have some general settings in the wind wizard that we can access from here as well. And there are some settings in the generators themselves. And the wind property can be accessed in by clicking on animation menu and here the wind. So again, let's hide these and hide the zone as well because we're going to test the wind on this tree. So on the fan, right click, wind wizard, and now we're going to use this ornamental tree. And wind weight, just set them for us. And the default settings, hit OK. And now you're seeing a basic wind motion happening in here. So let's select this. So as you see, the first level of branches, the first level, which is the trunk, hasn't the wind applied to it yet. Because the speed tree thinks that this is a trunk and not be moved by the way. So if you want to activate the wind, and if I select this one, you see the wind is active in here. And if you want to apply it on the trunk as well, you want to hit apply, and now the trunk moves as well. And if I bring this up, you can see now the trunk itself is moving as well. So let's hide these. And now you see the trunk is moving because we have activated the wind on it. And also the wind weight is there so that you can multiply the effect of the wind on the specific generator. For example, now the wind is so calm, and if I select this one, this branches, and increase the wind, you see they get affected more by the tree, by the wind. So let's go in here and change the wind on this one. Now you see the effect of the wind happening. This is really multiplier to the wind, and just like the resolution when the wind is moving like this. Okay, this was about the wind, and there's one more, which is the level offset, and this level offset is going to be controlling the next children's which come after the parent. So if I select this one to be not applying any wind to it, and let's set it to be 1 and 1, and make this one 1 as well. Now you see this is the trunk and not receiving any wind. And now these big branches are the first level that are receiving the wind factor. And if I set this one and make it something higher, for example on these, now this big branch is getting the first level of wind, and this one is getting the second level. And if I offset this, they're getting the third, fourth level of the wind. And to have the ultimate control over the wind, you go to this fan and hit edit wind properties. Hmm?